This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, to the ACRM Pandemic Task Force webinar series, where we are trying to address issues that that frontline rehab staff and administrators are faced with. So today we have a guest host, Dr. Eddie Foot, sorry, and she will be hosting our guest, Theresa Cruz, Dr. Theresa Cruz, the Acting Director Program Officer from NCMRR and the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Development. Just a few housekeeping items, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about our speakers and presenters. So over the course of the series, we were trying to present information. It started out, we were covering all of the changes that were coming down the pipe from CMS regarding telemedicine and telerehab and trying to break into this new field of remote care. And we had on a lot of guests. We had on guests from the APTA, AOTA, ASHA, and some members from the field. And those presentations are available on the ACRM pandemic website if you didn't get a chance to catch them and you have questions about reimbursement and charging for telerehab. As a group, we've been talking about sort of, now that the information, we're waiting on more information from CMS to come out. So we're looking at other areas and issues that we're hearing from members and member organizations that are facing frontline staff and administrators today. And they seem to fall into three separate categories. You have charging and reimbursement, you have care delivery, and you have education and research. And so we are going to be having different areas of focus in the coming weeks. We're going to be having guest speakers on from the different special interest groups within the ACRM, talking about how to deliver care remotely for specific patient populations. For example, your stroke, spinal cord, oncology, and some nuances in care delivery in those patient populations. So look for announcements on those coming out. Today, as I said, we have Dr. Edie Field-Foat, Director of Spinal Injury Research and the Whole Spinal Injury Laboratory, Professor, Emory University School of Medicine, Division of Physical Therapy, and Professor of the Practice, Georgia Institute of Technology, School of Biological Sciences, as well as Shepherd Center. So Dr. Field-Foat, very nice to meet you. And then the guest speaker for today, as I said, was Dr. Theresa Cruz. She is the Acting Director of Program Officer for the National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research, NCMRR, and the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, NICHD, for the NIH. Dr. Theresa Cruz became the Acting Director in September 2019. She is a full-time NIH staff member since 2009. Through basic translational and clinical research, NCMRR fosters the development of scientific knowledge needed to enhance the health, productivity, independence, and quality of life of people with physical disabilities. In her capacity as a health scientist administrator at NCMRR, Dr. Cruz manages grants in the Devices and Technology Development and Rehab Diagnostics and Interventions programs. She also manages Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Awards in medical rehab. In addition to her duties at NCMRR, Dr. Cruz is a team lead in the NIH Brain Research through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies initiative, where she co-manages a grant portfolio in the areas of neurotechnology development, validation, and translation for applications in neuroscience, neurophysiology, movement disorders, pain, neuromodulation, and other interfaces with the nervous system. In 2015, Dr. Cruz performed a research detail at the Functional and Applied Biomechanics Laboratory in the Rehabilitation Medicine Department of the NIH Clinical Center. In late 2016, she returned full-time to NCMRR. Dr. Cruz received her bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering with highest honors from the School of Engineering at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. She received her master's and doctoral degrees in biomedical engineering from Northwestern University. Her previous research at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago focused on motor control and gait impairments of the lower limb following stroke. So, welcome, Edie, Theresa. I will turn it over to you. Eddie, are you there? Eddie, Eddie, can you hear me?
I think I'm muted. I can't, sorry about that. Well, John, you did such a great introduction of Theresa. There's not very much left for me to say, but it's a great pleasure to ask Theresa to step forward to the presentation. I wanted to say it's been a great pleasure in my own role as chair of the National Advisory Board for the National Center on Medical Rehabilitation Research. It has been a privilege to work with Theresa, and I can attest to the commitment and creativity that she brings to that role. And I also had the opportunity to work with Theresa in her role as a program officer, and she has really been one of the most outstanding program officers that I've worked with over my years at NIH. And so we really appreciate her taking the time to be able to update us on goings on at NIH at this unusual time in our history. So, Dr. Cruz?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Eddie, for this wonderful invitation to speak to you all today. If you've been watching the NIH websites, I'm probably not going to tell you much new, but I hope to clarify a few things and to let you all know that NIH is here for you and to give you some ideas of the flexibilities that we are providing during these really unusual times. Let me see if I can get my slides to advance. Okay. I have no financial disclosures, but I do have a couple disclaimers. This is a rapidly evolving situation. So the slides I've put together were current as of April 1st. I double checked a bunch of websites today. I think they are still current as of today, but please come to the websites. I will show you them, check them frequently. Most of them are being updated every day or every other day. The second disclaimer is that I am not an infectious disease expert, so I'm not going to be talking about the science of COVID-19 today. If you are looking for that, I suggest you turn on the television, go to a news channel, wait 5 minutes for Dr. Fauci to come on, and he will answer all of your questions, I'm sure. Okay, and with that, the learning objectives for today, I want to discuss our NIH late application policy, some guidance on human subjects research affected by COVID-19, flexibilities in administrative and financial areas, how this impacts our peer review meetings, and then talk about funding opportunities related to COVID-19. So general messages, patient care and researcher safety is our first priority. Okay, so do not let things like prior approval from NIH prevent you from doing things like donating personal protective equipment, supplies, ventilators, etc., that were purchased with NIH grant dollars to help patients with COVID-19. Okay, we want you to do the right thing, and that is making those donations. So if you have PPE and it's needed in your area, please go ahead, donate it. We will work with you later to get it replaced. Many of you are being called to clinical duty when you are, supposed to be working on NIH research. Please go where you are needed. Please go do the work of caring for patients. Please do not let the idea that NIH will be mad at you because you fell behind on your research impede anything like that. Okay, go where you're needed, do the work, and I'll talk a little bit more about flexibilities to grant funding later, okay? NIH will work with you later when we're on the other side of this. to get you back on track, to get your research projects back where they need to be, with flexible timelines, with administrative funds, etc. Okay. If you have specific questions about your grant, please reach out to your program officer. Please reach out to your grants management staff and let them know your specific situation. But we know everyone is affected by this. We know it's going to impact progress. But again, patient safety, researcher safety is our first priority. Do the right thing here. Okay, when you go to any NIH website, so there's 27 different institutes. You probably all have your favorite one, the one that gives you the grant money, right? You go there. They all have a banner at the top. Most of them are in red, but they all have this banner that says COVID-19 is an emerging, rapidly evolving situation, and it has links to both the CDC for public health information as well as NIH for research information. There's also a listserv where you can click to sign up to get emails from NIH about COVID-19 changes, and I would recommend that. So when you go to that coronavirus page, the first link for NIH resources is to the Extramural Community, so you all. This is the screenshot I took a few days ago. It looks a little bit different today. As I mentioned, they are updating these sites very frequently. There's a couple videos on this website from Mike Lauer. He is the NIH Deputy Director for Extramural Research. So his office makes all the policies for the extramural community. And he has a couple nice videos, pretty much repeating what I'm saying to you now. There is an FAQ page. Last time I checked, there were over 50 FAQs. There's probably more now. So really, this is the page that you want to be going to every day, every other day, to check to see if there's more information that might be helpful to your particular situation. Okay, so the NIH Late Policy due to COVID-19, we put out two notices. About a month ago, we put out a first notice, and then on March 26th, we updated that. And the nuts and bolts of it are that for applications with due dates from March 9th through May 1st, we will be flexible in accepting late applications through May 1st. You do not need to provide a cover letter explaining a justification why. Normally, a cover letter is required for a late application. We are not requiring that now. I think we can all guess what it will say. You also do not need advance permission to submit a late application. Okay, we understand that's going to happen. The NCMRR Early Career Researcher RO3 due date was March 30th. So if you were not able to meet that deadline because of COVID-19, you do have some flexibility in getting that in. So we are still accepting those. There is an early April small business due date that would be encompassed under this policy. And those, I think, are the two that are most relevant to this audience. If your application is ready, please send it in. This is not meant to give people an extra 6 weeks to perfect their application. This policy is meant to help people who were distracted with administrative or clinical duties related to COVID that prevented them from submitting on time. So if you have an application and you're planning to tweak it until May 1st, please get that in now. Our review staff really need to get a handle on how many applications are coming in. We are trying to honor the council round that these application due dates were originally assigned for, but the later people submit, the more difficult that becomes. So that is our current policy. I know people have asked about due dates after May 1st. We do not have any guidance on that right now. But again, please stay tuned to that website. This is where we're at as of today. Okay, the second topic is guidance for human subjects research affected by COVID-19. So again, the emphasis here is on patient safety, the welfare of human subject participants, and the research staff. We know all of your institutions are taking steps to ensure that human subjects are safe, that staff is safe, related to their NIH-funded clinical trials. Please work with your IRBs to record protocol deviations, to make amendments to protocols, to continue work off-site or remotely as possible. Many people have been looking for kind of guidance from NIH on what to do with their clinical trial. And I would say that most of this is going to be a case-by-case basis. So if there is a specific question that you have about your research study, your clinical trial, please go ahead and reach out to your program officer to walk through those potential changes. We are offering two flexibilities. So we have one related to time. So we are relaxing our policy on second no-cost extensions at the end of a research project, particularly clinical trials. There is generally a 7-year limit on clinical trials, and we are relaxing those. You can also request mid-project extensions, and those provide extra time during the middle of a grant period. So if for some reason you were not, and these are flexibilities that can be used at other times too, but we're being more generous with them now. So if you're at maybe an earlier stage of a clinical trial that hasn't quite gotten off the ground when COVID hit, a mid-project extension might be a better option. And these are going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So if you are currently impacted, if your clinical trial is impacted, please have your authorizing official send a letter to the grants management staff at NIH related to your project. Also include your program officer in that email, stating the nature of the impact and an anticipated time frame for the delay. I realize we may not know what that time frame is until we get on the other side of that, so this may need to be updated. And then when it's time for you to submit your next progress report or a final progress report, please address the impact and the results of those delays. Okay, so remember, these are official communications, so they need to come from your signing official to the grants management specialist on each individual grant. Okay. The other flexibility is with regards to rebudgeting and costs. So many NIH grants have flexibility in rebudgeting. So you don't need prior approval from NIH to rebudget within the existing scope of your award. So if you need to do that, so you need to do remote sessions instead of in clinic sessions, things like that, you can rebudget for those different costs. I will talk about supplement requests at the end. I'll come back to that. And remember, if you do need prior approval, we're here to be flexible. And that's with regard to supplement requests. Okay, there are other types of awards that may not be human subjects, and these flexibilities are applied to both the human subjects as well as other types of NIH research. So these I lumped under administrative flexibilities. So we have extended pre-award costs. So things are a bit slow here, as you can imagine, as we try to process all of these awards and changes. Can someone mute themselves? I hear someone. Okay. So because there may be delays in issuing new awards, we've extended the pre-award cost period. We are now accepting late financial and progress reports. Most of you with NIH grants will probably have SNAP awards, which is streamlined non-competing application process, if you've ever heard that. For those of you who do not have SNAP, normally if you wanted to carry over funds from year to year or apply for a no-cost extension, you would need a waiver and prior approval. We are waiving those prior approval requests. Salaries and stipends can continue to be paid off of NIH grants as long as your institution allows it. So please check that your institutional policy on that. We know that people will have lost fees for things like conference registration and travel, etc. So if you had a non-refundable fee for a canceled event, you can still charge that to the grant if it's a fee that NIH would have paid anyway. So if it's an allowable expense, we will let you continue to do that. We are extending our closeout by a year, so you have time to finish your closeout reports. And then there's also an audit that some of you may have that delays can be delayed for up to a year. Okay, so those are the administrative flexibilities that we are affording during COVID-19. We've gotten a lot of questions about peer review meetings. So I want you to know that NIH is open. We are still accepting applications. We are still conducting peer review. As far as I'm aware, there's been no decisions to skip any council rounds or skip things. We are still going forward. But most of these meetings are not going to take place in person because of social distancing. So they are going to happen virtually. I already mentioned that we have these late applications coming in. We are trying to get them in the original council round, but if that may not be possible, so we're asking for a little bit of flexibility there. And really, I just want to thank all the peer reviewers who are continuing to do this work in even more difficult situations. Sitting at your computer virtually for a day or two is not fun, and I think they're doing a really incredible job. The scientific review officers who have all had to scramble and create new meetings, again, they are doing a wonderful job, and some of them are running meetings from their basements. I mean, it's crazy times. In case you all aren't aware, NIH went. Oh, someone's talking. Please mute yourself. In case you're not aware, NIH went full-time telework as much as possible starting March 13th. That was our last day in the office. So most of your staff that you're interacting with are on telework. And I really appreciate everyone's patience as we've moved into this kind of new era. As much as we are trying to be flexible and patient with you, I just ask that you give your NIH staff the same courtesy. Okay, so there are a few funding opportunities that are going to be related to COVID. And when I talk about these, there's really two categories. So there are funding opportunities that are related to doing research on COVID. Okay, so I will talk about those first. In general, you can't rebudget an existing grant to change the scope, and that includes to do work on COVID-19. You need prior approval from NIH to do that. So if you were working on malaria and now you want to work on COVID, you need to talk to your program officer about is a change of scope appropriate and allowed, because remember, those aims will not have been to peer review. The other thing is for competitive revisions. So these are also known as supplements or competitive supplements. And in that case, you have an existing award, but you would like to add an arm or a aspect of research related to COVID to that current study. So you have a clinical trials network and you want to also, collect information on COVID, let's say. There are several solicitations on the street, and if you go to that NIH extramural page that I showed earlier, if you scroll to the bottom, it lists all the different what are called NOCs, Notice of Special Interest, regarding different types of supplements. So you will see some that are urgent, and you will see some that say emergency. Okay, and they're two different things, and they have different due dates and flexibilities. The ones for emergency competitive revisions have access to additional funds from the Congress. The urgent competitive revisions just come from our regular appropriation. So if you're not sure which one you should be applying to, please talk to your program officer. Not all NIH institutes are participating in these. You have to make sure that the institute that is funding your research is accepting them at this time, and that list has been changing daily, so keep an eye on that. The other type of supplement is an administrative supplement, and these are for grants that are unrelated to COVID research, but have nevertheless been impacted by COVID. So here, I'm just going to ask you to exercise patience. I don't think we know what the impact on research will be until we get to the other side of this. So I suspect that some of you will be able to rebudget your existing funds to cover whatever delays you may have had. Some of you may just need additional time. So before you start asking NIH for additional funds, and I'm sure that we will need to make some of these awards, please wait till we have an idea of what the impact is going to be. So you may not know what your delays are yet. You probably don't, since we don't know, when this will all end. So that said, if there is still something that is mission critical, that is a dire situation, don't be afraid to talk to your program staff about it, and they can work with you on whether there are funds available for that, and what you need to do to get them. But keep in mind, I still think we are at very early days in this, and we will be here on the other side. We've also gotten a lot of questions about trainees, ESI status, early stage investigator status, funding opportunities that have time limits for the PIs. So the question is generally, will extensions be allowed? The answer is yes. NIH will make allowances. We will grant extensions. We understand that work can't be done during this time, and we don't want that to adversely affect trainees, particularly and junior investigators, as much as we can mitigate. There are specific instructions on the FAQ page to request those extensions in ESI status. And here's just another plug for the FAQs. I'm going to wrap up now, just to say that if you have specific questions about your project, please reach out to your program officer, reach out to your grants management specialist, and be a little bit patient with us. everybody is reaching out to us right now, so the email load is quite extensive. If you have a new frequently asked question that you think should be added to the list, go ahead and email that grantspolicy@nih.gov email address so they can get that up for other people to read. And I think I will stop there and take some questions.
Well, thank you so much, Theresa. That was so informative, and it sounds like everything's rapidly changing, and your advice to actually visit the NIH page for the most recent updates is really valuable. I'd like to encourage the participants, if you have questions for Dr. Cruz, please enter them into the chat, and I will read them so that everyone can take advantage of them. Theresa, you talked about a number of different types of approvals, and I suspect that this information can probably be readily accessed on the FAQs, but I wondered if you could recap really briefly what types of things require prior approval and which are automatic. So for example, you mentioned the extension of the submission deadlines for grants that are due between March and May, and it sounds like that's automatic. You don't need to request it. What other things fall into the automatic category versus items that need to be discussed with the program officer?
Sure. So things like delayed progress reports, no-cost extensions, your first no-cost extension, pre-award authority. Those are things that an institution can do without prior approval. Things like changing an institution or changing a PI or changing a scope. Those are things that really need to be discussed with NIH prior to making those changes. If you're not sure, reach out. But several of those things are grantees have flexibility at any time. So rebudgeting, for the most part, unless you're adding a foreign site or a foreign component, can be done, by the institution. Yeah.
So that's a great point. So related to that, my recollection is that the rebudgeting can be done automatically if it's within a certain percentage, but is there currently more flexibility, or will there be more flexibility related to rebudgeting because of COVID-19?
So this is probably going to be a case-by-case basis. I mean, we're trying to be as flexible as possible, and some of this may be you guys make the decisions and then talk to NIH about it later, and we understand that. So I'm thinking about things like changing percent effort by a PI. Maybe you're getting pulled off to do clinical duty, and you're going to drastically reduce your effort. And normally that's something you would talk to your program officer about first. But I'd say under these circumstances, that's a reasonable thing to do first and then talk about it later.
So specifically as regards funding for trainees that may be on NRSA awards, is there any discussion about allowing extension of those award periods?
I've seen specific guidance for the ESI. I have not seen specific guidance on NRSAs, but I think that would be a really good question to put to the training committee. In general, we don't want to penalize people when we don't need to. So I suspect there will be some flexibilities there, but I have not seen them specifically called out yet.
Okay, maybe that's one that we can ask be added to the FAQ. I wonder if there's been a lot of impact on recruitment and enrollment for many rehabilitation research studies, as I'm sure is true across the board. Do you anticipate there may be any additional funding available to aid with additional recruitment, or perhaps to be able to bring in participants from a wider area to supplement recruitment costs when we come back on the other side of all this and can begin recruitment again?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you are aware that NIH was given additional dollars. At the moment, all of that money has gone to NIAID, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. So not every NIH institute has access to additional funds beyond our appropriation at this point. That said, program staff and IC leadership across NIH knows that these requests are going to come, and you know, we're more than halfway through this fiscal year. We're starting to think, you know, will these requests come, you know, before October 1st or after October 1st? So we're preparing. We're thinking about the models. How how until we get a feel for how much these requests are going to be, it's a little bit hard to say exactly how much money is going to go to, you know, supplementing existing awards that have had delays versus, you know, going into new awards like we do every year.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment, and I'm going to take a moment to ask participants if they have other questions. It may be, Dr. Cruz, that you were just so thorough in your overview of the current changes at NIH that you've answered every question that everyone has. But if you don't mind, let's give a moment to see if anyone has additional questions that they'd like to ask at this time. All right, well, seeing none come in, thank you again very much for this very informative and valuable overview, and also for the tips on where to go to have questions answered from the FAQs and from listservs. I'd like to encourage those who are participating to consider joining the rehabilitation research listserv that Dr. Cruz runs. There is a question from one of the participants. It says, I'm not seeing the request for an authorized official to send notice of delays. Can you offer direction on where to find this?
That's something your program officer would tell you after you talk to them. So I was just trying to make it easier for you guys.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so that's a great point. If you have very specific questions or issues related to your research, your program officer, who is the scientific officer for the funding, it is a very valuable resource to be able to answer questions that are more specific.
And just before I go, I would just remind everyone that the NIH is shifting to a cloud service on April 17th. So none of the ERA modules will be available April 17th through the end of the day on Monday, April 20th. And that's the Commons, Assist, Internet Review, iEdison, everything. So just be aware that if you're trying to access those systems April 17th through 20th, you will not be able to do so.
One more question has come in. Let's see. For grants that are in the middle of the period, but whose recruitment is severely affected, will there be an opportunity to get a supplement towards the end of the grant to support staff to run an NCE period?
So that's something you're going to want to talk to your program officer about. So there may be options to supplement at a later point. We have to think about how we stagger these. So that's a good point. It may be that some grants will get supplemented early or get more time early, and some will get them later. So that's going to be a case-by-case situation, and you should definitely talk to your program officer about that.
So have you seen and can you share any examples of grantees who've redirected their data collection methods to use virtual tools?
I don't have any in my portfolio right now. There was a perspective in JAMA last week that discussed ways that people could be creative in continuing clinical trials. So there's a lot of ideas in that paper.
That's great advice. Thank you. I hadn't seen that myself. Well, thank you again, Dr. Cruz. I wish you the best, and I know that you are super busy during this unprecedented and uncharted time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of ACRM, thank you both for coming on and sharing your expertise today. Obviously, keeping research going is we're gonna be spending more time on this topic. So thank you for kind of breaking us into this area, and maybe we'll be getting updates from you later on if more comes to light. So thank again our guests today, Eddie Field Vogt and Theresa Haynes Cruz. Thank you. On Thursday we will be taking a break, but we'll return on Friday. We're going to be having on Fenji Kuo, who heads up the rehab services for LAH Healthcare in Wuhan in China, giving some perspective from the front lines there, maybe helping prepare people for what they might see in their own departments, in their own organizations. So please join us again, 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday. Again, thank you both for your time today, and everybody stay safe, keep a safe distance, and we'll talk to you on Friday.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.